Okay, so I'm going to be bending another set of sides here. I've already got one already bent, and I'll let you just take a quick gander at that. This is the Bolivian Rosewood Morado. It's not Rosewood. And over here I've got the side that's getting ready to be bent. That's been soaking for a while. I've been giving these quite a bit of time as far as soaking goes, just because it's a heavy, dense wood, and I want it to be able to really do the job. Now I'm starting here. The pipe's cold. And I'm lining it up so it is right down the middle. Raise it up just a tad, just to, you know, twist it a bit. I want to make sure that it does not actually contact the pipe with the flame. And right now it's just warming up. There's not a whole lot to be done. We'll just wait for a while. I'm going to go ahead and film through this, and we'll do some little tests. Just drop some water on it. You can see it's getting hotter here first. Well, maybe you can't, but it's bubbling over here. So what we really want is the whole thing to be fairly uniformly hot. I'm not putting much heat onto it right now because I don't want one very hot spot. This again. Okay, that's about right, but over here it's not that hot yet. Lower that just a little bit because it seems like it's getting hot here. I want it hot back here, so since it seems to be a slight angle going upwards, should be heating this better. Now, a real key part of doing your bending is to make sure you know what side's up, what side's down. This one's going to be bending like this. The waist will be here, up about here. So, okay, that's about right to start bending with. So I tend to always go this direction. I'm putting a fair amount of pressure on this. This is a heavier wood. Morado is about the same density as Brazilian rosewood. It doesn't have the same texture, but it does have a very similar stiffness. So even though I have not used this in the past, except for clamps, I've made some clamps out of it. I'm hoping that it will yield a fairly decent instrument, and I really have no belief it won't. I'm putting a little bit of pressure on this end, and I want to get a decent bend out of it. And it's bending fairly quickly. It's been soaking for over an hour, so that's not too bad. Now I'm holding this into position here to let it cool off a little bit. Now checking it against the mold, it looks pretty good. Cool it off a bit. Now we go to the next section. I do a section of 2 to 3 inches each time. And it has to overlap a bit. Notice that it's not boiling off the water real fast. If it was, then I'd say that the pipe was too hot. So here's where we need to tighten this up a bit. So we come back, a little bit more pressure, and then we're going to hold it for a while to try to get this curve to set. It's if you don't do this, then it's difficult to get it to hold the curve after you bend it. So we're kind of just doing this. Okay, let's see what we've got there. That looks pretty good. Now for the last section of the upper bout. Again, I'm moving the wood over the pipe. I don't want to have any one particular area get too hot too quick, because in that case it's going to bend very quickly over that area, and then I'll have a bump in the bend. You can see at this point there's no charring of the wood. Okay, that's fairly reasonable. Here I'm marking the waist with my fingers, and I'm going to do the same basic thing with the waist. And here we may get some charring, we'll see. Now we can see that our pipe's warming up pretty good, because we are boiling off the water on the other surface. So we don't want that to happen too much. We'll turn this down. A little bit there. Okay, so come back a little bit more on the upper bout. You can see it's dark, it's not particularly charred. This is actually a dark mark in the wood itself, so that's not char, although you can see that it is bubbling through, so the sap does bubble through some of these areas. So we're pretty close here. Okay, so now I've done the upper bout and the waist. I'm going to come in. Waist is still pretty hot, so I come in and do the upper part of the upper bout, which is not terribly curved. In some guitars it's actually flat, but this one has a nice curve to it. And we're going to come in, we're going to try to work this strong bend in the lower bout. And again, we're going to hold this. I don't know if you can see it, it's steaming off of there. The pipe has got enough latent heat in it at this point that it's hotter. So you don't really want to be touching that with bare hands. So I've done a little bit too much there. I'll move this over so you can see what I'm doing over here. So I'm checking it. I'm primarily going off of the waist. There's some overlap here I'm going to have to cut off, and there's going to be overlap here I'll have to cut off. So I've switched over and now I'm doing it from the other side. Does, when you get it hot, it does retain a certain amount of motion. You can move it around in. I'm going to have to start taking off some of these clamps and these others. I'll just move it around here so that it's still holding that in place. So right in here is where that strong bend comes in. I have to say I'm being fairly careful on this, trying to match up the mold as much as I can, the form over there. And it's not so much that I don't trust that it'll set in just by sitting there drying and cooling. I'm sure it will. But I do like to get it close, at least. Now, one thing that happens sometimes is the curves will tighten up after you have it bent during the cooling and drying process. And you have to live with that. But that's just a matter of coming back, and when it's dry, just touching it up just a little bit to match up. Now I also tend to do a full width lining, which means the lining covers the entire side. And that sets it right into shape very nicely. I don't know if I'm going to do that with this. I would like to compare it to a Brazilian Rosewood guitar I made not too long ago, a year or two ago. I still have that guitar because I really liked it. And okay, So we're pretty much there. And a little bit too much bend right here. That's okay, but I want this one to go in. So I'm going to hold it for a while. My form is not perfect. It's not like it's laser cut or anything, or CNC'd. It's certainly not that. There's a little flat spot here that I don't like. So that rounds that off nicely. And then let that cool a little. And then once we get over here, I'll be cutting this off. Although I may just clamp it in place there. So I'm okay with where this is at right now. I think that works out nicely. I'm going to need a cut on the other piece there. And then we'll see where we are and fit this in and turn that off. Hope we don't burn ourselves walking around the shop.